Hello, everyone. This is our first video podcast. We wanted to support the GNOME 50 release, and I thought we would have a conversation with my friend, Matthias and Clasen, who is the maintainer of GTK. And so we wanted to start off with asking my friend here, Matthias, what excites you about the GNOME 50 this cycle? What have you been working on?
Yeah, normally I'm also a member of the release team, and I would probably have a lot of things that I'm excited about coming up in the release. But over the last 6 to 9 months, I've distracted myself quite a bit by my own work in GTK. I've been working on implementing SVG support for GTK, and that is something I'm genuinely excited about.
Oh, that's cool. So tell me a little bit more about this SVG thing.
All right.
What would a programmer or a developer who's doing libadwaita or GTK, what would they find interesting about this work?
Right. So of course, GTK, we've been able to use SVG images in GTK since forever, right? We've been using librsvg indirectly via GTK Pixperf to render SVG at a certain resolution, and that has been working. That's how we've been using SVG icons all along. But now, in modern times with fractional scaling, you really want to take advantage of the scalability aspect of SVG to render the image or the icon at exactly the resolution you need, and with this indirect approach that we've had in the past, that wasn't really possible. So now for the very first time, we have native support for SVG, which allows us to render everything at precisely the number of pixels that we need to show a crisp result. And that's, I think, something that people can look forward to. It'll probably appear more and more over the next development cycle as application developers start to embrace this, and also as we roll out the new icons. Jakob Steiner, our icon designer in GNOME, has been busy working on taking advantage of the things that I have been putting into place in GTK, and we work together on some rapid feedback cycles to implement features that were useful to him. So I think there will be some nice and cool things coming out. Also, not just sharper icons, but also animated icons.
So one thing I think users might be excited about is the fact that in higher resolution or 8D, these icons would no longer be kind of blurry or anything like that. It would actually be nice and crisp, right, in whatever resolution. So this is something, at least from a user perspective, that is quite cool. And also, we talked about, there was some about animations, right? Where
yes.
you can
that is one motivation for me to actually work on SVG in the first place, was to explore whether we could use it for animations. SVG has its own language for animations, and that's supported by the web browsers. And now the GTK SVG machinery supports it as well, so we'll probably see a lot more smooth transitions between different states, and like if you click on a button, the icon might not just switch over from one state to the other, but it might smoothly transition.
That's really, like, you can do some really wild things with that.
You can do wild things, but I think what you'll mainly see is subtle improvements. The user experience will improve without necessarily being in your face. We want to be subtle and tasteful about it.
Right.
Always.
Right. And you had a blog post about this, about the work you've done, and in it there was a cool little graphic where you were running tests, and the completion tests, SVG tests, and the work you've done in GTK was one step below browsers, but even better than, say, Inkscape.
Yes, and maybe I should explain a little bit. Like, SVG as a format is somewhat insane. Like, I think some people have said that if you take all the specifications that make up SVG together, it's more than 800 pages, and that's a lot. Web browsers, of course, implement all of that.
Yeah.
And I found a pretty extensive test suite that covers all of these 800 pages, and the test suite itself has something like 1,600 tests, and web browsers usually come in between 1,300 and 1,400 tests.
Right.
So they're kind of up there. There's still things that they don't do right and where they disagree
Right.
because the spec is not always clear, and it's easy to miss something in 800 pages.
Right.
Right. But my code now comes in at 1,250 tests in my unscientific self-evaluation.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty proud that I managed to like get up to that level within like less than a year.
Right.
And this is higher than, for example, Inkscape or librsvg are currently on that test suite.
And going back to Jakob's work, and he's done there was a link in there that kind of shows Jakob's work where there was a slider that can show the brightness, and you said that there was a change, like you're using stroke versus still.
Yes, so that's this dynamic stroke width, as I would call it, is something that came out of our close cooperation. Like while I was working on the code to implement SVG, Jakob was trying to use my small, simple SVG editor that I wrote to support this, and he gave me feedback on what works and what features he thinks would be useful. And one thing he suggested is that it would be really useful to have like a way to dynamically adjust the stroke width, very similar to the way that you might choose a bolder or lighter font. And our symbolic icons are a lot like glyphs in the font. Like we want them to kind of mesh with the text around it, so it makes a lot of sense to have a similar dynamic stroke width feature for the icons. So that's what I implemented and what Jakob will be taking advantage of in his icon work.
Right.
And going forward, I think you'll see that appear in applications, and it's going to be another case where it's going to be a subtle difference, but it'll probably improve the user experience.
Right. But that sounds like something really exciting in GTK land, especially for developers and even users, especially if you really like to see crisp fonts or crisp icons and so forth. Tell me what anything else in the GNOME 50 release that really like you're a personal fan of that you like to call out?
I'll stick to GTK for a little bit longer. Like one aspect of this SVG work was that we had to implement some support for the filter parts of the SVG spec. We didn't quite have all the necessary things in our rendering infrastructure, and we added that over the last development cycle, and that gave us all the building blocks to implement something that looks very similar to Liquid Glass, which macOS, of course, has been known to like embrace, and people are eager to copy and adapt. And I think we'll see some people start playing with that and hopefully produce some very cool and glitzy effects.
Oh, that almost seems like you can do some interesting application theming in a sense, right?
Yes.
I'm sure that comes as a surprise to some of you that we do support theming, and especially from a user perspective. One of the things that I've been sort of focused on that's sort of tangentially related to GTK development is GNOME OS. For GNOME 50, we've really been doing a lot of interesting things in GNOME OS. GNOME OS is sort of our QA engine. We QA all the components in GNOME. So it's all parts of GNOME is always available through GNOME OS. So you can always have a functioning GNOME OS that's on the edge, or nightly releases, or whatever you want to call them, but they're always taken from the GitLab sources. And it's in this way we are able to have a high quality release every 6 months now. It's always been one of our dreams, right? Is to have our own GNOME OS.
If I may say so, like in GTK, we actually added a GNOME OS job to our CI setup, so we can now test GTK against the latest nightly builds of all the other components. So we know that there's no like weird interference or regressions coming out of that we wouldn't notice until release day, and then it's a little too late to fix them. So it's always in QA. I think the secret is always to have very tight loops and avoid shipping something that's broken and then getting feedback later on, because by that time you have already 20, 30, 50 commits on top that make it harder to unwind and fix the issue. So the quick feedback and then turnaround from the nightly compose is really invaluable for
Right.
the people writing the code.
And from and also this gives tools for other members of our community, especially the extensions community, to have an opportunity before release to test their code and make sure they can update their extensions so that they can see if it broke or it didn't, or if it just requires a version change, that kind of thing. And in fact, even for users, they're able to test those extensions, maybe help the developer, the extension developer out, see what works and what doesn't, file a bug, that kind of thing. So that way we can improve the experience for every release of GNOME by having these extensions tested. So if your favorite extension is, you want to make sure it works at the time of release, using GNOME OS is a great way to sort of test those extensions and so forth.
Can I ask you a question, Yusri?
Yeah.
Do you know how many people are working on building GNOME OS? Is it a whole distro team that does it, or how many people are?
No, it's 8 to 10 people are doing GNOME OS, and there are a few major ones that have been doing a lot of work, great work. But
so I assume a lot of this depends on having good tooling that enables a small team to keep on top of a whole stack of desktop software.
I mean, a lot of them is using the free desktop SDK as its sort of basis, right? So we use something called build stream that will build the lower level, the OS, and it's really great because all of us can engineer the bottom layers.
And I think one of the characteristics of build stream is that it builds the whole thing in one go, right? It doesn't build individual components so much, but it builds the whole thing in one
go, right? And so they have recipes for each one, and it just consumes those recipes, and then it can scale to the tool can scale to a whole series of machines, so you can have an entire build farm to build them out like that, and then come back. So and it caches the results, so you don't have to build everything from scratch every time, and so that makes these things coming out quite a lot easier. For instance, GNOME Web or Epiphany uses WebKit, which can take many hours to build. So that's not something you want to build every time on a pipeline. Yeah. so having that cached and ready to go and not having to keep on rebuilding them are important time-saving parts of it. So, but
that's really quite impressive. That is such a small team of people is able to essentially pull off the whole Linux distribution's job to produce something that works on computers and
absolutely
lets them boot and run.
Yes. It truly is an amazing piece of GNOME ingenuity, I guess I would say, among many other things, including your work on SVG and so forth. We will try to bring some more videos on the upcoming GNOME 50 release. So I'd like to thank my friend Matthias for bringing through. And I would also like to say that cheers to you. And that concludes Two Old Men from GNOME talking about the GNOME 50 release. So I hope that you found this interesting. And if you'd like us to do more, please put that in the comments. So thanks again. Take care.
Bye-bye.